It's all about the co-conspirators. That's what people want to know when it comes to the release of the Epstein files. But although a lot of talk has been about the 10 alleged co-conspirators mentioned in an FBI email that was part of the releases, there seems to be more than just 10. Even Ghislaine Maxwell is now saying there are 25. Let's discuss. I'm Dave Ehrenberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, aka the Florida Lawman, here on the Midas Touch Network. So here's the deal. We know that there are a lot of people out there who have been alleged to be affiliated with Jeffrey Epstein. And we know that in the recent batch of releases by the Trump administration, which has an email from July 7th, 2019, from an FBI agent who has a subject that says co-conspirators. And it says that contact was made with so-and-so, and there's deletions and redactions, but there are 3 names who are not redacted. I'm going to get to that. But they also refer to the status of 10 co-conspirators. So that's what's getting a lot of attention. Who are these 10 co-conspirators? All right. I'm going to explain why it's more than 10. So when it comes to 10 co-conspirators, this was an ongoing FBI investigation, apparently, and they reached out to a number of these people to get a statement from them. But for some reason, they unredacted 3 of the names. And why? Well, the 3 names are Ghislaine Maxwell, Jean-Luc Brunel, the photographer in France, and then Leslie Wexner, who is the head of Limited Company, who had a long-standing relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. So when it comes to Ghislaine Maxwell, I understand why that was unredacted. After all, she was convicted of sex crimes with Jeffrey Epstein as a co-conspirator.
I need to tell you something that should make everyone's blood boil about these Epstein file releases. We've been hearing all this talk about 10 co-conspirators mentioned in FBI emails, and people have been fixated on who those 10 people are and why their names are being protected. But here's what nobody's really talking about. There aren't just 10 co-conspirators. There are way more. And we know this because Ghislaine Maxwell herself, currently sitting in federal prison serving 20 years for sex trafficking, just said in a legal filing that there are at least 25 men who should be considered co-conspirators and who've never been charged with anything. Let me break down what we know and why this matters. In the recent batch of document releases, there was an email from July 7th, 2019 from an FBI agent with the subject line, Co-Conspirators. The email talks about making contact with various people, and most of the names are redacted, but 3 names were left unredacted: Ghislaine Maxwell, Jean-Luc Brunel, and Leslie Wexner. The email also references the status of 10 co-conspirators, which is what's been getting all the attention. Now, I understand why Maxwell's name wasn't redacted. She was convicted of sex crimes with Jeffrey Epstein as a co-conspirator. That's public record. I understand why Jean-Luc Brunel's name wasn't redacted because Brunel, the photographer who was implicated in Epstein's operation and charged with crimes in France, killed himself in prison. He's dead, so there's arguably no privacy interest to protect. But why was Leslie Wexner's name left unredacted if the Justice Department is supposedly protecting people who haven't been charged with crimes? Wexner is the billionaire founder of L Brands, the parent company of Victoria's Secret and other retail operations. He had a decades-long relationship with Epstein that nobody has ever been able to adequately explain. Wexner is vastly wealthier than Epstein ever was. Why would someone of his stature and success give Epstein power of attorney over his finances? Why would he be so closely associated with someone like Epstein? Those questions have never been satisfactorily answered. And if the Justice Department is willing to unredact Wexner's name as an alleged co-conspirator, why are they redacting everyone else's? The inconsistency is glaring and suggests this entire process is being done selectively for political purposes rather than following any coherent legal standard. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. Which brings us to Bill Clinton. Clinton's name and face have been plastered throughout these document releases. Photos of him on Epstein's plane, references to him visiting various locations, his image in what was described as a hot tub with someone the Justice Department tweeted was an Epstein victim. A DOJ spokesperson literally put out a tweet saying, "There you are, Democrats. There's your leader in a hot tub with an Epstein victim." That's not professional law enforcement communication. That's political warfare. Now, if there really was a victim in that photo, which hasn't been corroborated, why would you release Clinton's name and photo at all? If he's actually the subject of a criminal investigation, which the Trump administration authorized specifically to look into Epstein's relationships with Democrats, then his name should be redacted to protect the integrity of that investigation. That's standard practice. You don't publicly identify targets of ongoing investigations because it can compromise the case. But they're doing it anyway because this isn't about justice or proper investigative procedure. This is about weaponizing the Epstein files to damage Trump's political enemies while protecting Trump and his associates. The whole thing reeks of political manipulation, and the inconsistent redactions prove it. There are also serious problems with how victim names were handled. Some victims had their names unredacted when they absolutely should have been protected. Dave Ehrenberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, thinks this was probably just sloppiness rather than intentional, and that the Justice Department is now going back and fixing those mistakes. But it shows there's no real rhyme or reason to how they're handling this. They're being intentionally selective about embarrassing Bill Clinton while accidentally exposing victims who deserved privacy. That's incompetence at best and malicious political manipulation at worst. But here's where this gets really explosive. Ghislaine Maxwell recently filed a habeas corpus petition, which is a separate legal track available in federal cases even after all appeals are exhausted. She's arguing that her constitutional rights were violated and she's being improperly held in prison. Among her arguments is that this was a selective prosecution, that she's being used as a scapegoat when there are dozens of other people who should have been charged. And in this petition, which has been massively underreported despite being publicly filed, Maxwell makes some stunning claims. On page 11, she calls out a victim's lawyer named Edwards who stood at the Capitol and teased the media about a list of men while knowing there was a list of at least 25 men with whom there were confidential private settlements. 25 men who paid to settle claims from Epstein victims, and according to Maxwell, all 25 should be considered co-conspirators. On page 20, she says explicitly, none of the 4 named co-conspirators or the 25 men with secret settlements were indicted. She's referring to the 4 co-conspirators named in that controversial 2007-2008 non-prosecution agreement that gave Epstein a slap on the wrist in Florida. That agreement not only gave Epstein immunity for future crimes, but also gave immunity to his named and unnamed co-conspirators. Maxwell claims she should have gotten that immunity as an unnamed co-conspirator, though prosecutors obviously disagreed since they charged her anyway. But the key point is, she's identifying 25 men who settled secretly with victims, who she claims should have been prosecuted, but who never faced any charges at all. On page 41, she goes after former Attorney General Bill Barr, saying that after Epstein's death, Barr admitted they were looking for someone to indict for trafficking. She argues that she wasn't named in Epstein's first or second indictment, that 4 other women were named as co-conspirators, but none were ever charged, and that the government could have indicted those 4 or any of the 25 men who settled with victims but chose not to. Now, I want to be clear about something. Maxwell's legal arguments probably aren't going to win. There was enough evidence to charge her. This wasn't a vindictive or selective prosecution in the legal sense. She participated in serious crimes and deserved to be prosecuted and convicted. The fact that other people who also should have been charged weren't doesn't make her prosecution improper. And frankly, her argument that the Trump administration selectively prosecuted her doesn't hold water when that same administration allowed Trump's lawyer Todd Blanche to interview her without asking hard questions, and then transferred her to a minimum security prison in Texas where sex offenders aren't even supposed to be housed. Maxwell is representing herself in this petition, which tells you her high-powered lawyers have either abandoned her or she can't afford to keep paying them. This is a pro-SE filing, meaning she's acting as her own attorney. probably because even wealthy people have limits on how much they can spend on legal fees, and she doesn't have an active source of income while sitting in prison. She likely had some legal advice in preparing this 50-page petition with case citations, but she can't afford to pay lawyers 7 figures to pursue appeals that have essentially no chance of success. But even though her legal claims will probably fail, what she's revealing about the scope of this conspiracy is enormously important. She's confirming what many of us suspected, that the 10 co-conspirators mentioned in that FBI email are just the tip of the iceberg. There are at least 25 men who paid to settle claims from victims, which is basically an admission of guilt, even if it's not technically a criminal conviction. You don't pay settlements to victims unless you did something wrong, and none of those 25 have been charged. None have faced prosecution. Most of their names are still being hidden behind redactions. They got to pay their way out of accountability while Epstein and Maxwell took the fall for an operation that clearly involved dozens of powerful men. To be fair, this problem didn't start with Trump's current administration. You could go back to the George W. Bush administration and ask why no co-conspirators were charged. The Obama administration had 8 years to pursue these cases and largely didn't. Even Trump's first administration, despite all the suspicious circumstances around Epstein's death in federal custody, didn't indict anyone besides Maxwell. This is a bipartisan failure of justice that spans multiple administrations. But what makes the current situation especially galling is that Trump signed a law explicitly requiring transparency about all of this, and his Justice Department is now defying that law to protect people. We're seeing selective releases designed to damage Democrats like Clinton while hiding or minimizing Trump's own connections. We're seeing inconsistent redactions that expose some alleged co-conspirators like Wexner while hiding others. We're seeing victim names accidentally exposed while perpetrator names are carefully protected. And through it all, Maxwell is sitting in prison saying there are 25 men who should be in there with her, men who used Epstein's operation to abuse victims, men who were wealthy and connected enough to pay settlements and make problems go away, men whose names are in the files that Congress demanded be released and that the Justice Department is still hiding. This is the cover-up Maxwell is describing in her legal filings, not a conspiracy theory about some mythical Epstein list that he supposedly kept, but the documented reality that at least 25 men paid settlements to victims, that FBI and prosecutors identified them as co-conspirators, and that none of them have faced any criminal consequences while Maxwell serves 20 years. Those are the names that should be in the unredacted files. Those are the people Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are trying to expose through their inherent contempt action against Pam Bondi. Those are the powerful men that this entire cover-up is designed to protect, not 10 co-conspirators, 25 at minimum, probably more if we ever get access to everything. And the fact that Maxwell is the one revealing this number should tell you something. She's got nothing left to lose. She's already convicted and sentenced. The Supreme Court rejected her appeals. She's doing this pro-SE petition that probably won't succeed. But in the process, she's putting on the record what she knows about the scope of this operation. 25 men who should be co-conspirators. 25 settlements. 25 people still walking free while she's behind bars. That's not justice. That's selective prosecution of the most obvious perpetrators while protecting everyone else who had money and connections. And it's exactly why we need full transparency in these files. Not the slow drip designed to embarrass Trump's enemies. Not the selective redactions protecting the powerful. Complete release of everything so the American people can see just how many were involved and how many got away with it. Maxwell might be going to lose her legal case, but she just gave us a roadmap for what to demand from the Justice Department. Not just the names of 10 co-conspirators, all 25 who settled with victims. And if there are 25 who settled, how many more are there who didn't settle, who just got away with it entirely because prosecutors decided not to pursue them? That's what this cover-up is really about, not protecting 10 people, protecting dozens, maybe hundreds of powerful men who participated in or enabled a child sex trafficking operation and who've never faced any consequences, because the system is designed to protect wealth and power above all else. Maxwell knows it. The FBI knows it. The Justice Department knows it. And now, thanks to her habeas petition, we know it too. The question is whether Congress and the American people will demand the accountability that all 25 of those men have escaped for far too long.